Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-host Daniel Quinn, and joining us once again is C.R. Rowanson. We'll be calling him Clark throughout the episode. I can't really call you a special guest anymore, but it's weird to just call you a co-host, but whatever. We'll get around that. I'll get over myself, and we'll get into this this second part of our world building session that we've got going on. So last we left off, we had a world coming in from Levon, which we have turned into Wuxia Tower. As I always suggest, this is the second part of a series. If you haven't listened to the first one, I suggest that you do. And remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, click on the link, follow the instructions, and within no time, we'll be building your world live on air, like we're doing now. If you want to follow us on social media, we're over on Twitter at Let's World Build. If you want to come and talk about stuff with us in person, I mean, that's not really feasible, but we've got a Discord to ease that kind of need that you might have. There's a link for that in the description of the episode. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous or just want access to our sweet patron-only episodes, you can click on the link in the description for our Patreon and give us money over there. And without further ado, all that shilling out of the way, it's hard to shill, guys. I mean,
it really is.
I have to say, it is not my natural inclination to shill, but I'm glad that it's over with. Anyway, last we left off, we had a twist, which is war is sports. And normally I kick it over to my co-hosts, and especially because, technically Clark is like kind of a special guest, but to kind of bring him into the fold, I'm going to shove him to the side so I can get out my reconciliation for the twist first, which is I want there to be so I was approaching this kind of setting. War is sports. We've got a tower. We've got high fantasy with a slight focus on wuxia stuff. That's really cool. I'm concerned that all we would have is basically just like another tournament fighter or another tournament arc in an anime. So what I've done is I've introduced a system into the tower that there are 36 different recognized quote unquote sports or masteries that you can achieve in order to help you ascend to the top of the tower. Because in the original episode, Daniel had mentioned that the flare at the top is a beacon to many people. And so I've decided to codify that. And there are now 36 different masteries that you can achieve scattered throughout the tower in all sorts of directions and all sorts of sports as well. I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from, not much inspiration, but some inspiration from the 36 Chambers, which is an old Kung Fu movie.
So good.
The 36 Chambers of Shaolin. Yeah, absolutely. Daniel will recognize that as the movie we went and saw for my bachelor party. We went and saw RZA do like a DJ thing over the movie, which was amazing. That's just a brag. I don't know why I added that in there, but so that's the idea. I had this concept because I think it adds a lot to what we're trying to add to this tower, which is not just combat sports. I'm thinking that you have to master a number of skills that will eventually help you in this ascension to the flare at the top. Stuff like swimming or jumping or just like basic skills. And the other thing, I know that I'm monopolizing a lot of time, but I have this cool idea and I want to get it out there. The other thing that I thought would be interesting about this is that there's no set number for you to get to the ascended top. So you can have one and still make the journey to try and make it, right? And this, I think, is interesting because it leads to quackery, like fake kung fu schools or fake martial arts schools. They're like, all you need is my school. And then it's the perfect scam because you're training these dupes and the dupes are going to come back dead. So you keep their money. It's like the perfect scam. And only people who I don't know. I think there's a lot that we can do with this type of thing. I'm going to shut up so I can allow my co-host to kind of come in and talk about this. As you can tell, I'm just very excited So yeah, by all means, go ahead.
Well, that actually dovetails in very nicely to what I was thinking. Is I really wanted to introduce the concept so for not just war as sports, but conflict in general is some kind of
Mm-hmm.
sport. So I wanted to add in this facet where most, if not all, like challenges and disputes are settled through contests. Like I know you wanted to step away
Oh,
from like tournaments. I'm not just talking about tournaments. We're talking duels. We're talking art contest, swimming
sure.
races, that kind of stuff. Because part of my familiarity, anyway, with the wuxia style, you have all of these like named heroes, these epic people
Mm-hmm.
who have developed specific attributes and ways they go about things, and this seemed like a interesting way to really promote that, because then you might have a whole caravan where they have one really strong swimmer and they have one person who is just a master of poetry and calligraphy, so that when they meet the road they're like, okay, this guy's a master swordsman, but we're fighting over these resources here. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
challenge him to calligraphy.
Oh, that's fun. I like that a lot, actually. So
So
it's like or maybe there's like maybe there's like a neutral zone where it's like you've got calligraphy, I've got swordsmanship. We can meet in the middle and do this other third thing, like as like a neutral ground setting, or maybe there's a whole codified system of how challenges and duels work where you can choose neutral ground or neutral contests, so to speak. So it's encouraged to be good at many things.
right, and depending on how ridiculous you want it to be, it might become a combined thing where you have where the competition between a swordsman and a calligrapher is that you have to get a well scribed glyph on your opponent,
Yep. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
whether with a paintbrush or by cutting it into their cloth with your sword. You've got
Of
to get the
course.
glyph, and then the quality of the glyph determines who wins.
Right. So
Uh,
a simple Zoro
yeah.
Z is not going to be doing the most damage here, right?
I like how this reflects to the idea in this genre of self mastery, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I would want to see that I feel like is lacking is, and although the conflict here is against oneself, I feel like in an epic fantasy we still want some kind of very tangible antagonist or antagonisms. And so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure what that would be, and I think maybe that'll arise from our factions later. But I think it's cool to have these tiers of ascension, potentially of mastery, to get to whatever the flare is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking that the very tower itself is enough of an antagonist. Like, there's already the evils that come from the core and the ocean and stuff like that. So that there's already some kind of conflict. And then on top of that, you have the ascension, which is going to be a massive challenge in and of itself. That was kind of my thinking about the major conflicts anyway.
I do agree with you, Daniel. I think there is room for human conflict in there, and I think
Mm,
there's definitely some stuff with some of the factions that I have in mind that I think will really lend to that, because we're
mm,
talking about creating a more rigid and formal system of challenges and victories, right? Of all
mm,
forms, and anytime there's a
mm,
system, there's loopholes and ways to take advantage of it, and
And you
there will
want to
be,
mm.
destabilize it, yeah.
yeah, there
Well,
will be people doing that.
I think that's partially why I was so drawn to this idea of like mastery of the 36 different forms, because to me, that is like there is some kind of symbol of your mastery. It's not like you're walking around and you can just claim it. It's like you have to have like either a medal or a ring or a sash or something like that that indicates that you are a master of this thing. There is some level of authority. And another reason I was so kind of taken with this concept is that it also encourages wandering heroes to be a thing, because you go to one place, you master this particular practice, and then you get the sash, you get the badge, whatever it is, and then you move on to the next place to further improve yourself so you can eventually make that journey to the mountaintop.
Right. I mean, the different
Tower
plateaus will be
top.
known for different forms. I mean, if you wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
a full duplicate, then it could be the 36 shelves or the 36 plateaus. Uh,
Yeah, 36 levels. Yeah. I think that doesn't necessarily work out because we're actually really limiting the space in that way.
Yeah,
But
I'm just saying if you wanted to do that in terms of a single
absolutely.
story.
No. I totally get it. Yeah, 100%.
And it sounds like there's two kinds of stories too that are possible, like in this setup. Like if you wanted to zoom really in, you could talk just about a group of heroes attempts to be better, right, and to
Yeah.
achieve whatever they're trying to achieve. Um, However, if you also want to incorporate kind of the larger fantastical concepts we've put in place, so like there's the mystery of these people's origins. There's a cyclone in the center that spews out evil. There's the unknown mystery of the flare. I think then this stuff becomes kind of the lattice that the story is working with. So like there's systems of mastery in place. So then like kind of to Clark's point, how do we subvert that to then create conflicts that are on top of that? And I think that's where we can, where our factions might answer that question.
Yeah.
I will tell you now, mine absolutely does not. But I do have thoughts about that. But we haven't heard from Daniel about your reconciliation with the twist, Daniel. What did you want to add to this that Clark and I haven't already talked about? Like we've already input our stuff. So what's your concept that you're working with?
I mean, honestly, I was totally fine with tournaments. I was hoping to possibly do some kind of twist on a tournament. But I think I can work that in through my factions.
Okay.
Well, and we can still do the tournaments. I think the idea is just so that it wasn't only
the same. Yeah.
Right.
No, I like this because it can be like a framework in a way that all of the cultures in this place are similar. Like that they share this in common, like this idea of mastering themselves to get to the top. And that's cool because that it's a sports based thing. Like I really like the idea of like the swordsman and the calligrapher, yes, like working on this in the same duel. And so maybe the swordsman's dexterity with their weapon is, you know, drawing this mark on the coat versus the actual calligraphist drawing on them, you know. So like that's a cool sport thing. The question is, I guess I'm not sold on the conflict of the whole setting being that. I think there's a chance for us to do something even more on top of that.
Oh yeah, I mean we have so many. I mean, like I was saying earlier, we have so many opportunities for small interpersonal conflicts between individuals. And I think one thing that I haven't really expressed that I think is, I think it is kind of like ingrained within the wuxia setting as well, is this idea that there is some kind of a corrupt or not necessarily evil, but let's just say like corrupt or fattened bureaucracy that is often the counterpoint to the lone or wandering hero. And so what might be interesting to kind of convey that in a lot of ways is through the 36 different offices that offer these masteries, right? And what might be interesting to add an additional level of conflict is every X amount of years, kind of like the Olympics, you know, there is a contest to be the host of whatever that mastery is, because your style of jumping is outdated and awful. My school's style of jumping or calligraphy or sword play or whatever it might be, you know, like there's a contest to show your own mastery, and that's between many different schools and many different layers and stuff like that. How do we feel about something like that to add an additional level or layer of conflict?
I'm absolutely digging it, because then you have so much stuff from the standard kung fu style movies, like all of the competitions between houses. You can have some very Karate Kid type stories where somebody gets brought into the world and is challenging it for reasons of either a sense of personal security, a personal sense of self-worth, but that brings them into a conflict between two schools of a specific mastery, each of them trying to become the main school for whatever reason. So I actually want to jump in with my faction, because I think this is gonna provide a lot of interesting hooks, and definitely I do like the idea of there being specific organizations for each mastery. But I wanted there to be a faction. In my head, I've just been calling the arbiters, the arbitrators, and they are people who can formally oversee these challenges and duels. And
So
they are
There you
we
go.
want referees then.
more or less, and they are
Gotcha.
an organization that has the authority to declare winners, and depending on how fantastical you wanted to get, they are the ones who either you, if you wanted to, I would go the route of them doing like using magic to actually enforce some of the contracts, and
Mhm.
maybe even having things where they can generate miniature arenas and stuff to make it more interesting. But within that, these people are obviously supposed to be neutral, but there's all kinds of potential for
Mm.
manipulation and control and corruption, because they could set out the conditions in such a way that one person cannot win
Oh
while
yeah,
still looking like it's fair.
absolutely. There's always the classic trope of the corrupt referee or official who like doesn't notice when the bad guy is cheating because they're paid off, and there's all sorts of good stuff that you can do when it comes to that. Daniel, I want you to step in and talk about this for a minute because I feel like you have some opinions here.
I like that as a way to embody what you were talking about of having potential hosts like that they're vying for. So like if these arbitrators oversee that process, then there's the opportunity for like corruption, I guess, like among the various groups. So then it gives you more of a really society story you can tell when it comes to the different like peoples that are doing these sports and trying to better themselves.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. One thing I'm actually very torn here when it comes to these referees, Clark, and I'll tell you why. One, I love the hook in the idea that there are humans who can be paid off and whatnot, like who oversee these things. The other side of me wants to make it a lot more fantastical to the point where some of these arbiters are like completely alien or outsider in nature. They're like celestials that have divine like judgment over these particular contests. And I think that we have an opportunity to do both, where
Yeah.
maybe like lower
Can they come from the
contests or
flare?
what's that?
Can they come from the flare?
Yeah, of course, Daniel. Well, of course. That's the thing that I wanted to integrate is that the tower itself or the flare is like there are rules that it's trying to enforce. And that's weird in and of itself because we talked about this thing kind of being like an organism last time.
Oh,
And
maybe they're shepherds.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're the ones who are ultimately the ones who decide who are allowed to ascend to try and like reach the flare.
Because they're trying to shape better heroes, right? If they're arbitrating. And then the question is, how are they corruptible? That would be interesting. Too.
Well, see, that's what I'm thinking is that the ones at the very top, the ones who are weird celestial bodies and beings, they aren't, but their subordinates are. And that's where you can get like really regional, local scumbag fucks who you're just like, ooh, that motherfucker, he hasn't passed a single mastery person in X amount of years because he doesn't want his precious student to be beaten. You know, that type of story.
If they're like angels too, like the ones that are really at the final tests, like they kind of go down and act as messengers to their human arbiters who were below, and those are probably the ones that are corruptible, like you're saying.
Yes,
like so,
exactly.
like the truly weird ones at the top near the flare, like you can't really mess with them, but they go down or pass along the rulings to those below.
Exactly.
I'd like to push on that a little bit and maybe morph it slightly, because I've really been enjoying the idea of just the tower functioning, and for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure, I am a little less enthused by there being a actual personification of the tower. But I would really like the idea of if there are specific places where
maybe they're not from the tower. Maybe maybe they have taken up that charge, but they're not actually of the flare.
Okay,
yeah,
that could work.
They say that they speak for the tower, but in reality, they're like their own faction or have their own morality.
I do really like the idea of there being very specific locations or possibly very specific events where the energy of the flare is regulating things. And that might be part of like a single ultimate tournament, or maybe that's actually what the mastery challenges are, right? That's where the tower itself is the arbitrator. And in theory, everything else is supposed to get you ready. But in terms of the corruption, I was kind of picturing it is if you have these people who are supposedly interpreting the will of the tower.
Yep.
I see. Yeah.
That alone, just
No,
all the
I
potential
like
for the
that because it keeps it
misinterpretation.
mysterious. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I also like that as well. I think that we can probably do this. We can use like kind of an old school philosophy where these ultimate arbitrators are like alien gods that we don't really understand. So maybe we can. That's where we can add in the kind of. But hold on, let me rephrase that. I think what we can do is we can also have it so there are these celestial beings that maybe that's where the interpretation lies, right? Where these things are these weird primal gods that aren't actually gods. We're just interpreting them as such. When you look at, oh, I want to learn how to wrestle, and there's like a bear that is supposed to be the avatar that somehow instills energy or power, or at least you can divine some kind of a fighting style from it. But then that creature is just living its life, doing its own mysterious, weird thing. And then there are the speakers for that celestial bear who this is how you're supposed to learn how to do that thing. Does that make sense? Does that make like some kind of does that kind of jibe with what we've got going on
the
here?
way you can interpret that is it's like maybe they are heroes themselves who have lost their humanity, because it seems like all of the beings that are sentient in this realm are forms of humans as far as we've understood so far. Like they're
humanoids in some way. Yeah. I think we talked about some weird, like hybrids and stuff like that. Yeah.
I could see like a fiery angel sort of character at the top who's really just like a really enlightened being that believes truly that it is of the flare, but it's just itself a hero,
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah. Potentially failed heroes, or maybe actually ascended heroes who didn't achieve all of the masteries, but just a couple. I was also thinking humanity, or all the people in the tower came through the vortex, through the sea.
right.
So I see no reason why there couldn't be a smattering. Like we're already introducing evil and monsters of a variety of kinds. I see no reason why there couldn't be some that are sentient and might themselves end up developing some of the masteries.
Oh, so some of them could be monsters. That's cool.
Yeah, so if there was just a highly intelligent bear that developed the wrestling mastery.
That's actually really cool, because it also implies that you can learn the masteries from these evil creatures, or quote unquote evil creatures in some way. Or they, like, oh, the evil squad brought a team to like fight for the mastery title this year or something like that. That actually, it raises stakes, and I think is kind of interesting because it makes it so they're less just elementally evil in some ways.
Well, I'm picturing having a reason now to go into the darkness to
absolutely
to duel with the being that's there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that totally works, I think. And then you have the opposite as well, where the holders of the titles of mastery suddenly become targets for everyone else, right?
Right. But yeah, that was my faction, was the arbiters or the shepherds. I do like the shepherds.
Yeah, that worked. I think shepherd works too. Yeah. Daniel, what did you have in mind for your faction? Because I like what we've got going on here. I want to hear from you. What do we got?
I was thinking of ways to make this go to the next level of like epic fantasy. And so I wanted to start with a group of creatures that are seemingly small and innocuous, and like have it open up to really something big. So it's technically two factions in one. So I had
I love cheating with technicalities on the factions, Daniel. So please tell us.
I'm picturing like some innocuous kind of like flying squirrel kind of humans somewhere near the very peak. And the reason why they've evolved that way, or they've been magically, changed, because we're saying there's weird different kinds of humanoids, is because they're so high up that like the winds are crazy. So having light bodies has made it easy for them to get around.
Of course.
And they're the keepers of like some kind of special secrets or relics or something that have been around for a long, long period. Because you go up to them, to their little terraces, to find ancient information. But the spin would be with them is they also kind of glide out off the terraces into the winds beyond like the boundaries of the tower.
Yeah.
And that's where the second faction arises, which I would love everyone to really help build. But I'm picturing, because to raise the stakes of the whole setting, some kind of outlanders from beyond the tower who are from their own tower and are an invading force of some kind.
I just want to say I love the idea that it's another tower.
Mhm.
Like I love the idea of bringing in multiple towers now from like that's really cool.
I know it's
was
premise breaking, but I'm
Okay,
thinking,
that was
like,
going to be my only
Yeah,
question. Is it?
I
I know
agree.
but I don't want to see the tower. I just want to bring the outlanders in.
The other thing, I do really, really like that. I do really like the outsiders who are causing problems and not everybody necessarily knows about it.
Mhm.
If we wanted to keep it more in vein of a single tower, how would you feel about if there were levels much, much lower where they only exist on the they only exist externally? Because we've talked about how there are plateaus and shelves on the outside of the tower exposed to the elements, and then there's all the ones inside, and you get closer and closer to the core and the vortex. So what if these outsiders are only they're literally just outsiders down further on the tower? There is no way for them to get inside other than to travel through the core up into the regions above, and maybe that's how they're invading and trying to raid and that kind of stuff. I don't know if that would still fit with what you were thinking, but that way it could be outsiders while still having it be part of the tower itself.
What I'm trying to introduce is deliberately premise breaking. So, like,
Okay.
I want them to emerge from the clouds, and the horror of seeing something from beyond the limits of their world, I think, is the key to how they work.
Okay.
And I don't know what I mean. They could very well, if you want to make there be one tower, they could very well be from millions of years ago from this tower.
Gotcha. This is your
out
obligatory great old one.
Yes.
Well, this is
and they can be
also
human too.
this is also Daniel going back to his roots of like deliberately trying to fuck with the setting, which is like I support in many ways.
I mean, and they could be human. They could very well. I mean, one way I was thinking about it is maybe they are outlanders who used to rule the tower, and they were cast out into the void. And they
might
returned,
I suggest something?
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea that may or may not work. I like this idea that when these the flying squirrels like glide out into the mists, what they see walking towards them on spindly legs, whether they be like spider legs or crab legs or whatever, is actually a tower. And the idea that a broken piece of a tower is now shambling towards the main tower.
Yes.
It suggests so much mastery and alienness to this other faction that you're like, oh fuck, this is terrifying.
200%. 200%. I love that because it also suggests how old this must be, having been broken off from the tower.
And that brings it back together where and it may not be immediately obvious, but at some point, if they bring back a sample and somebody does an analysis and like, oh wait, it's the same material. This is a piece of our tower.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that. So that's how we don't really break the premise, which I think is fair.
Right. But we can still make it so there is like a secondary, like, I mean, there again, mystery, like, where do these strangers come from? Why do they have a piece of our tower? Are they the same? Are they different? Like, we can really go in a multitude of directions. That
were they the first to emerge from the cyclone? I don't know. Like,
exactly. There's so much that we can learn and like speculate. Like, that's how you know you've got a great idea, when there's suddenly like you break the rules and you add like a completely new mystery level to what we're fucking talking about here, you know?
So I don't care how we define them. That's all I want. So
my question,
leave that to you guys.
My question to you, the piece of tower that is ambulatory, is it walking because of magic? Is it walking because of biomechanics? Or is it walking because of technology?
Yes.
I think that is a good question to ask to help differentiate from the original tower.
I punt that to Clark.
That's called passing the buck, Dan.
Exactly. Is that a sports reference? Punting, I believe.
Punting is in fact a sports reference.
Oh,
I'm proud of you. Look,
yeah.
So I'm not sure we actually need to define that, but I am curious as to why you want to define that.
I just think it'd be fun. That's
Okay,
all.
okay. Because yeah, if we just wanted to do it for fun, the things that I would find most interesting, well, I think because of what we've been building up with the tower itself is a giant mystery. So I would be interested in it being a kind of blend of biomechanical where it's something of the tower, but it's obviously not right.
Mm.
So
Mm.
maybe this piece broke off and then something happened to it and has changed it from the way the rest of the tower functions, but it is very clearly connected into the functioning of that remaining chunk.
Mm. I
So
see.
we talked about like the roots and the veins of the flares. So maybe something happened and the veins in this piece became corrupted and they're actually what sprouted out into the legs.
Gotcha.
Um, so yes, to kind of all three because we don't really know what the tower is at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I was just trying to add like I want a moment where people are taking out their like their red tape and like their cork board and they're trying to figure out what exactly the tower is by being like, well, this is obviously biomechanical, so the tower itself has to be biomechanical. But wait, this other thing, like that's like I'm trying to approach it in that way, like where we're adding mystery just inherently,
Yeah, and for me, I think that definitely does that for me. It kind of puts out all of those questions as to how is this working, and it could be a
Mm.
combination of well, yeah, I don't know. I'm really liking the imagery of just what they would recognize as the golden veins of the flare are now just like
They're like
uh,
lashing tentacles walking through
yeah,
like
they're
in
just
the
blue
mist
and
of the
silver,
tower.
and
Yeah.
instead of curling through the structure, they are all extended outward.
That's cool. Yeah, I can live with that. I think that works for me for sure. Yeah.
And this also this also opens a host of possibilities because as we learn more about the tower, right? The reason we have plateaus is because parts of the structure have collapsed, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because
we said that before. Yeah, yeah.
we're missing rooms, we're missing floors, so there could be a lot of these. In fact, you might have ones that are entire floating fortresses where just an entire closet fell off
Yeah.
or something like that.
Oh, and what you're also doing by suggesting this is now there is a layer of like rubble at the very bottom of this world that is essentially, like the underworld, but it's literally just like broken pieces of the tower all collapsed on its. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool imagery. I like
I
that.
mean, what's helpful about this from a world building perspective is we've have this element of the question mark mystery of you've got these outlanders that are out in the world. They have a piece of the tower, right? So there's many ways to answer the question of how. Like for example, with this rubble, you could say, oh, in the very beginning, for whatever reason, there was a war that created the necessity for the system of contests, right? And the people that were on the losing end of that war fell in the rubble and have been wandering the void for so long and now have returned to take back their tower. That's one way you can use as
Sure.
elements to reconcile it, right? Or
Mm.
you could say, like you were saying, Clark, like because the tower is falling apart, there's actually a whole society out there in the winds living on these hunks, and they're trying to reclaim the tower because it's a stable place to live. Like you could approach it different ways.
And it
I,
still all meets the tenet because even those people floating around, the extent of their universe is still the walls of the tower. It has just
Exactly.
separated
mhm.
from the tower.
Absolutely. The other thing that I'm kind of interested about as well, or this, I had this evocative imagery is like I because we there's still the mystery of the flare at the top, right? I'm just thinking that the person who actually gets to the flare, like when you're ascending, for some reason I had this idea that you're ascending above the mists of the tower. And once you reach the ascended peak where you can actually like basically reach the flare, you can actually look out you're above the cloud cover and you can see everything and like this massive expanse which might include other towers or pieces of tower. I'm just tossing out weird headcanon fan fiction that I've got going on here. That's all.
That would be an awesome ending to like an epic fantasy series. Somebody finally makes it to the top. They defeat the big bad evil guy, and they look out and they see dozens of other flares in the distance.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that is epic.
That's I mean, but like we're like jumping ahead, like
we
this
are.
is the end of like book 6. You know what I mean?
We haven't even gotten the final faction yet.
Yeah,
God damn it.
Well, see, that's the thing. I actually decided to do something weird and interesting and new because I was thinking about factions and I was thinking about like Wuxia and I was thinking about all this stuff and I'm like, well, I don't really want to do like a corrupt imperial like state because like that's, I don't know, that seems kind of like boring. And I didn't really want to do like an imperialist thing because I'm like, I feel like we've done that a lot. You know what we haven't done yet? A faction consisting of a single person.
Okay.
So I decided that my faction is going to be one person. Or one entity, I suppose, and they're called the Beast Who Plucks the Life from Your Chest. They're also known as the Hero Slayer, the Devourer, and they're essentially a mysterious figure who hunts heroes and those who seek to ascend. So they're essentially drawn to the people who gather mastery, and they're like they have seemingly no rhyme or reason, and it's not like they collect the mastery off of the body; they leave it there as like some kind of like a marker or something like that.
That's
right.
Fun.
Yeah. So it could be a person, it could be a human, it could be like some divine thing. I don't really care, but I do like this idea that it is often shrouded and like not much is known about it because of the way it lives and strikes and exists. So
I love this hero boogeyman. I love it because it's just like creepy. You could just toss it in there. It's kind of like, you know, when you're finished with the meal and you're like, yeah, I could just add one little spice to this, and you just hit it with it, you know?
Yeah. And he's also kind of a walking plot device, which I think is fun, you know.
And there's lots of ways to explain his origins, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean. Again, the mystery that you can create, compound, and confound people with is like that's what I was really intrigued by.
Yeah, no, that is solid. Before I forget, I do just want to step real quick back to Daniel's faction, because the name that popped into my head for these flying squirrel type people was just the Lore Chasers.
That's fun. Oh, I actually wanted to go back. Thank you for reminding me, Clark. I actually wanted to go back to Daniel's idea as well. I have this idea that they're also partly couriers of some kind.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I mean, if they're able to traverse up and down fairly easily, right? They can ride trade winds, draft winds, all that stuff. But the other thing that I find to be really fascinating is what if part of their job was to take the relics or the very powerful items and equipment that the heroes lose when they fail ascension. And then they literally squirrel it away somewhere else in the tower. Like, because again, they're squirrel people. They hide things. Like, I think it's thematically appropriate.
That's exactly what I see. I see a little bunk place with the little tiny one stuff with crap.
That's why I was thinking the Lore Chasers, right? They're running after these little bits of history and lore and heroism and then just taking them places. And then if you need something, they're always the ones you go to because they have collected it.
Something very important, obviously. Nothing like, hey, I need you to send this letter or something. I feel like the Lore Chasers themselves are like above that kind of thing, that they're above the mundanity of things. Like but that's why you have regular couriers. And these folks are just like ascend, like they are a big fucking deal, you know?
They're probably very, very polite.
Obviously. Yeah. These are like the people who will absolutely kick your ass, but while being super polite and being humble about it. You know, they're like Jackie Chan. They're like Jackie Chan if they were also flying squirrels. You know,
which is basically, I mean, that's how fast he is. So
I'd say he's faster than a flying squirrel.
That's true.
To be fair,
now, I did And so like we bounced in one direction. I want to bounce back to your hero killer because
Yes.
I know you said that you didn't want to give necessarily like a look, but I would love to like brainstorm some looks because the second you mentioned them, I was picturing like some fucking weird like Asian inspired like mythology monsters.
Oh, like an Oni or something like that?
Yeah, like very bizarre looking and like, you know, almost in the vein of classical angels in the Bible, but the Eastern Asian version of that, East Asian version.
I would love to give it some kind of a distinctive noise or like look in some way to indicate that it is what it is. I had in mind that it's literally just a collection of masks. Like it
I
might
that.
be like a semi-amorphous blob that has all these different types of masks hanging off of it. So when you hear it coming, it sounds like wood chimes in some kind of way, you know? And
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Yeah. But I could also just see that as like a cloak of masks, you know? So it like eventually when it's time to fight, it takes off this cloak and reveals its true form underneath, which I think might be kind of helpful to add that mystery to it. You know, like people look at it this way. It's like a cryptid, right? Where like when you think you see it, it's not actually what it is.
Oh, and then I could imagine like heroes who have like one or two heroes who have fought it and survived, but they're like forever scarred, having witnessed its true form.
And mind you, when they say that they fought it, they were just in the way of it trying to do another task.
Yeah.
That's how I see that. It's not like they fought valiantly to the death. It's like, no,
right. They like tried to engage it.
Yeah, exactly. And they got like demolished immediately. Yeah.
Because I could see like some portion of the story where the heroes proper are trying to make it to destination B, and they've heard tale of this creature being in their way, and they go off the beaten path to this like hermit's tower on some tier to talk to this old hero who has been stripped of his mastery, who survived, but he's like a shell of whom he was.
Yeah.
To tell them, you know, the one thing they'll need to possibly get past this, you know.
And like, of course, that information might be completely wrong as well.
And then they really got to like pull together as heroes to figure this out to survive. You know?
I just love the idea that the heroes are traversing some like perilous like ravine or like caves or, you know, like something similar to a cave. And all of a sudden they just start hearing like something that sounds like wind chimes. And they're like, oh, fuck.
That's a fucking one shot right there.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we gotta go. We gotta go immediately.
That would be so cool. Like rain. Yeah. There's obviously rain.
Yeah. And you know what this does? I think the reason I'm actually looking at it now, why I find it so interesting is this turns what should be like the most like superheroic, like giga powerful, like people. And suddenly you're a victim in a slasher movie.
Yes.
Like you're no longer the hero who mastered 7 styles. You're just another smear on the boot of this thing.
Because like the biggest thing is at stake. Like your literal mastery that you've worked all your life for is at stake. Exactly. So it's like the ultimate battle for these people.
Okay.
And yeah, absolutely.
So I really, really like the imagery of like a cloak or seemingly like body of masks. And I have been silently stewing in the background. And I think what would be incredibly creepy would be if, so you said the beast that plucks the power from your chest?
It's the beast who plucks the life from your chest.
That plucks the life from your chest. I haven't quite nailed it down, but I thought it would be awesome if that was part of the calling card of its victims, is if the masks it wears are from its victims.
Okay.
Whether not necessarily their face, but like something that it pulls from their chest that represents like
their masteries.
Or represents like who they are or something they're most proud of. It's like it's collecting things. And it is coming and it pulls out that life from your chest in the form of a mask. And then maybe that's what's left on the body, is there's just a piece, a chunk that is missing that looks like a face.
In Japanese mythology, there is, and we're going to have to move the location from this, but there is something that is like, it's an orb that's representative of your soul. And in Japanese mythology, there are monsters who they literally, and this is why I think it's like the concept is silly, but the concept is cool, but there is a silly aspect to it that I want to try and remove. But in Japanese mythology, there's a concept where you have an orb that represents your soul, and it's basically inside your asshole. And there's no way for me to get around that without it sounding ridiculous. And there are, yeah. And there's like a monster that is like known for literally ripping your asshole out and taking your soul. And like that concept works really well with what Clark is trying to get at. I'm not creating a monster who rips your asshole out. So maybe from the chest works a little bit better, you know? So like they're literally ripping the soul from a body through the chest in some way. I think that might work a little bit better for what we're going on with here.
Part of what I thought was particularly creepy is rather than it just being a standard injury, it does look like a piece of sculpture was removed from their body.
Oh, so okay. So it's like a perfect mask shape that's been removed from their chest.
Yes, it's like the imprint from the mask that it has ripped away.
Yeah, 100%. That so you have like grinning faces on like a cadaver, essentially, right?
Yeah, or sad faces, or ones with like one dripping eye, like whatever it was it pulled from that person, that's what's left on the body.
And so this thing is actively adding to its mask collection every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we nailed it. Daniel, if you say that we haven't nailed it, you're a fucking liar. I don't know what to tell you.
I think it's perfect.
One other thing that I want to add to that, though, is it's not. You see this a lot in folklore, right? Where there are weird quirks to some of the monsters. Like you'll see that with a lot of times with devils, right? Where you throw out the grains of rice and then they have to count all of the grains. Mm-hmm. There's actually a number of stories very similar to that, dealing with like dragons, where they're afraid or like they can be warded off with a rainbow scarf or a specific type of insect. So there could be all kinds of lore about how to distract this beast that might come down to either objects or acts that represent perfection of a mastery or a horrifying flaw in the mastery. So like one of the things you can do to ward it is if you can drop a piece of paper with a unrecognizable, completely unreadable piece of calligraphy. And then it is just obsessed with fixing it or something like that.
Oh, so or there is also, I believe there's also something similar to that where it's like you drop straw or rice, like you said, Clark, but instead maybe it's like they have to read a book or read like a scroll or something like that. So having it longer and complex and stuff like that would also allow like artists and artisans to have this kind of like divine place among people as like, oh, I'm a really like obtuse writer, right? Like Daniel and I were literally talking about Thomas Pynchon like last series. So it's like, all right, here's Gravity's Rainbow. The mask has to read this thing in order for it to like chase you or something like that. It's just a voracious reader of some kind, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know quite what that would be, but I liked the idea of there being, even if they're not true, that being the kind of mythologies where it's these weird things that don't necessarily make a ton of sense. Mm-hmm. But where then you might be able to have a clever hero who's like, it has to accept any challenge, right? And maybe you challenge it to compete against itself.
Oh, that's interesting. Like
or
somehow
things like
tricking
that.
it, somehow tricking it into like a contest with itself.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think that could work. Yeah.
And we don't have to develop it further. I just like the idea of there being that kind of mythology.
I like that extra layer for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes 100%. It works. Sometimes it doesn't. And people you don't really know without learning the true nature of the monster, which we're not going to get into here.
Right. Well, no, that would ruin the whole thing, of course.
We just have options, which is great, you know.
Yeah, I think adding that is very important. I do want to. I remembered the name of the thing, by the way. The idea of the soul in the ass is called a shirikodama from Japanese mythology, so you can look that up. And if I'm wrong about it, nerds, let me know, please, by all means. All right, so with all that out of the way, we've gotten our factions. We've gotten the reconciliation with the twist. We've also added so much more. There's like, this thing's a fucking parfait it's an onion parfait with how many layers we've added to this already. And there's so many mysteries. I'm loving all of this so much. We're going to run through the next thing, which is the main quest. So what are we thinking for a main quest for this particular setting that we've got going on here? And reminder, we have to add in all three factions. They have to play some kind of part within the main quest that we're dealing with. So where are our brains initially going with this?
I don't know. My brain is defaulting to restoration of the tower of some kind. Whether some systems are broken or it literally needs to be made whole again. That's really what my brain keeps going to. And maybe that's what all of the masteries are about, is developing people who have the right skills to deal with these variety of pieces. I think that's what I personally would be most interested in.
Something having to do with the reconstruction or restoration of the tower itself.
Right.
Okay. There's a curveball. What if the cyclone has stopped and fallen in and there's a hollow core and this is causing some kind of structural issue? It would be interesting for the heroes to have to solve the mechanism of their own doom. Otherwise, they're all doomed.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to that twist, and I'm going to say that Daniel's Outlanders are the reason that it stopped. Like, their arrival has stopped the vortex from swirling.
Or it's at least slowing, and they're getting that progression of like, we have to do something where it's going to stop, and we have learned enough that if it stops, that's actually a big problem.
The closer this walking tower gets to them, the slower the flow of the vortex is.
It's like draining it somehow.
Somehow, yeah. It's like imagine the world if the tide suddenly stopped. Like how bad that would be for everyone on Earth. It would be bad. It would be bad, you guys. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay. So we've got that. So how do we add in the beast? Because I imagine, right, if these are heroes, that the beast has the answer to this question, and you don't have to beat the beast, but you have to see it and outsmart it in some way, or at least get around it to its lair or something that has the answer to what's going on, or the MacGuffin that they need to break this enchantment or whatever. I feel like the beast is kind of like the obstacle in the way, and it's like, wait a minute, we have to do what? We have to, like something like that.
I'm also a huge fan of taking problems and turning them into solutions. So I think it would be amazing if that's part of it. It has squirreled away some kind of information the lore chasers can't get to.
Ooh.
But part of the ultimate solution is having some kind of conversation with it or communication with it. And being like, all of this stuff that you're collecting, right? You're getting bored. You've gotten so much of what you're looking for here. Over there are all kinds of new things that you can't even imagine.
That's really good too. Also, it's not that the lore keepers can't get to it. It's that the lore keepers gave it to the beast for safekeeping, because that's how important this bit was.
Oh, that's even better. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Ooh. All right. I'm doing the Antonio Banderas gif right now. You know the one that I'm talking about. That's what I'm doing right now. Okay, cool. Well, what else do we need? We need to add in your referees, Clark. We need, because that's the only thing that we don't have yet.
Well, I mean, since so much of this tower and conflict resolution resolves around these challenges, they can fit in pretty much anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, but we got to have them matter. They can't just be background. They can't be window dressing, man. They got to be important in the plot somehow.
So what if a lowly person in the Shepherds ends up being the main character that goes along on this quest and creates the final terms for the challenge with the beast?
It's a
that ends up getting
mission.
them the access to the information and getting it sort of on their side.
That's great.
Yeah, there we go. Nailed it.
I was gonna suggest like, is this like a fallen hero who has to redeem himself in some way? Because some of them are that's what they are. But this is even better because they're even less a influence, but they're the main character, so it's even more fun.
Exactly. And this is like the beginning of their hero's journey as well, of course, where you don't know that you're following the one who will ascend, because to everyone else, they're just like some referee or some kind of like lackey of some kind. And then they are becoming the major, not chosen one, but they earn that through conflict and this incredibly dangerous mission and all that good stuff.
Well, and also, who better to learn the masteries than somebody who goes around judging and setting the challenges of all of these masters? And they've just never bothered to do the challenges themselves because for whatever reasons they don't think they're worthy or whatever. And then when they're forced into the light, it's like, oh, like I've been training with these people all through the tower, and I'm actually quite good.
They've watched masters do this, and so like they've picked up tips and tricks throughout all of these different masteries, and they might not be a master of any of them themselves, but they're good and crafty enough to and steal like important bits and pieces from others where they can use that to their advantage throughout this quest that we're doing. Yes.
Yeah. And I could very easily seeing them, like, they train on their own, and when they do these bouts with masters, I mean, that would be fair. Like, you approach the winner and be like, you did really great. Could you just like show me some stuff?
Yeah.
Could you just like,
even the loser.
like I practice on my own. Could you just like critique my form?
That's good. That's really good. They're the ultimate fanboy or fangirl,
right?
Like, they're just like, oh man, can you sign my shawl? Like something like that. Okay. Do we need to add anything to this, Daniel? What do you think?
No, I think it's pretty good. Like, we've pulled in all the different little teams we got going on.
Even your secret double faction that you added, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
I thought my flying squirrels would have so much fun.
Honestly, I wasn't expecting to like flying squirrels as much as I did, but it's there. Yeah, I think that's it. Honestly, we nailed it. We did it in one. A big thanks again to Levon for suggesting this world and the premise. I hope that we did it. I had a lot of fun figuring this premise out. I don't know what else. Yeah, it's been a blast. And Clark, huge thanks to you for coming on and doing this series with us. Could you take a moment and shill yourself and let people know where they can find you, what books you have out, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So I am Clark, or you will find me online as CR Rowanson or the Magic Engineer. I have a website, just crrowanson.com. I am also on YouTube as the Magic Engineer, all one word. And in both places, I talk about how to craft and repair magic systems for your stories. I'm also a developmental editor and writing coach, working with all kinds of storytellers. I have 2 books out so far, both of them nonfiction. One of them is called The Magic System Blueprint, which is a tool I've developed to help people quickly get a holistic understanding of their magic system and how it can fit into their story. And these guys actually had me on their podcast a while ago, last year or so, to go through the blueprint. So there's some good episodes on that. And
that's an extra shill for us, Clark. That's incredibly skilled. Well done.
And it's better if we don't call it out, Rob, but I'm just really bad at that too. So
no, I like it. I'm all about openness when it comes to shilling. Trust me.
And then my second book is just a workbook that walks you through 15 exercises on how to identify where you need limitations in your magic system and helps you come up with some really killer ones.
And what's that book called?
That is Restrictions May Apply, Building Limits for Your Magic.
Excellent. Clark, thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. You're definitely coming back at some point. I don't know when, but
yes,
it probably won't be as long of a wait. Let's put it that way.
I certainly hope not.
Yeah. That'll do it for this episode of Worldbuild with Us. Remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com. Click on the link, follow the instructions, and with a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to come and follow us on social media, we are on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild. We tweet out stuff every occasion. It's what it is. If you want to talk to Clark in a Discord way about world building, if you want to come tell us that, the whole like soul in your anus thing is not actually real, You can do that by clicking on the link in the episode description and following that to our Discord. We can chat about stuff, whatever. If you want to, and of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always give us money over on Patreon, where we have all sorts of sweet stuff like access to patron-only episodes, early access to episodes. Just go look. Just click on the link. If you don't want to give us money, that's fine. If you do, hey, that's good too. That is it. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.